I don't hate archaeologists. I know that there's a lot of great work that's done by archaeologists. I myself could not do the work I do were it not for the work that archaeologists have done out there in the field, painstakingly digging and producing evidence. I have huge respect for archaeologists. I think there's a very limited group within archaeology who have this domineer mentality and who seek to control the narrative. But by and large, archaeology is doing a good and a useful thing. And I don't want... It's unfortunate that I've been identified as a hate figure by a number of archaeologists. I think there's much more potential for cooperation. And I'm not the only person working in this field of the possibility of a lost civilization. Consider Randall Carlson, consider Robert Schoch, many others. Manu Safzada, who you don't know, but he's brilliant, taught himself Egyptian hieroglyphs. He can read the Egyptian hieroglyphs fluently. There's a lot of people working in this field whose information could be of use to archaeology if archaeology would just lower its threshold a little bit to ideas it doesn't like.
And again, it's probably not most archaeologists are probably very curious about this.
Yes.
It's probably a very vocal minority and a power dynamic that exists in so many different aspects of civilization, where groups of people control anything.
Yeah.
They're very reluctant to give away that kind of power.
Absolutely,
especially if what they're doing is just discovering ancient stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not even like you're creating anything.
Yeah.
You're literally in control of the information that is that forms the narrative for ancient civilizations, which is something pretty much anyone who acquires the data can do.
Yeah. Definitely, and should be encouraged to do. We need to know about our past. We need to understand our past better, and archaeologists are part of a mechanism for understanding our past better, but they're not the sole mechanism.
Another thing that we talked about recently that I sent you was this new AI ability, that AI has the ability to translate some of these ancient languages now, which is really interesting.
I think so far they're getting more out of languages that have already been translated, where there is something for the AI to work on. Whether AI could be deployed to decode the Indus Valley script, for example, that would be very interesting. The Easter Island script, the so-called Rongo Rongo tablets of Easter Island, fully developed script which nobody can read.
Oh, really?
Do you know that Easter Island, back in the 19th century, was subjected to slave raids? The slavers were Peruvian slave raiders. They came to Easter Island and they removed almost the entire population. Only 111 Easter Islanders survived those slave raids in the 19th century. And they didn't include any of the old knowledge keepers. So none of the survivors' descendants now can read the script of Easter Island.
Wow.
And yet it had a script, and that itself is a mystery on a very small island.
Wow.
There's the Rongo Rongo tablets.
Look how beautiful that language looks.
Yeah.
It's so interesting looking.
And what is it telling us? You know, this is I hope AI can be unleashed on this and maybe find some solution to the problem.
Look how complex and beautiful it is.
Yeah.
It's so interesting looking. It's not like when you look at cuneiform, it's kind of crude looking.
Yeah.
You know, it's like these just weird
strokes and lines,
back and forth.
Yeah.
But this is gorgeous.
This is a beautiful thing.
And they don't know what any of this means.
And we have accounts that the elders used to read from them to the community. But all those elders were taken away in the slave raids, and nobody was left who could read them. And many of the tablets were taken out of Easter Island. Some of them have ended up in museums around the world.
Wow. It's so cool. I had no idea that this even existed.
Yeah, and it's a mystery. It's a mystery on a tiny island, 2,000 miles from Tahiti and 2,000 miles from the South American coast, a tiny island that they have their own fully evolved script. That is hard to explain, and it's one of the things that makes me think Easter Island's origins are much older than we're told.
Look at that drawing of it in the upper, right there. Yeah, that one. Look how wild that looks.
Mm-hmm. Many repeated characters, has all the characteristics of a script, of a written language.
Yeah. Wow. So how would AI, without a Rosetta Stone, without something that connects two together, because that was one of the ways that they deciphered.
That's right. If it weren't for the Rosetta Stone, we could not read the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. It so happened that a relatively late period of Egyptian history, when the Greeks were running Egypt, the Ptolemaic dynasty, that they wrote down a stela in 3 languages, in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, in the more recent form of ancient Egyptian called hieratic, and in Greek. And that gave them the key. From that, our whole knowledge of ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs has arisen.
Isn't it amazing? One stone.
One stone gave us access to that wisdom and that ancient world. Maybe not complete access. I think there's a lot that's not understood in the ancient Egyptian texts, particularly their exploration of death and what happens after death. They put their best minds to work for thousands of years on that problem, and they came up with all kinds of interesting ideas. But at least, thanks to the Rosetta Stone, we can read their texts. We can read the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead. We can read the Book of what is in the Duat. We can read the pyramid texts. Case of Easter Island, no such thing. So I hope AI will somehow be able to cross that divide without that initial key and be able to extract information from the Easter Island script. And I repeat again, the Indus Valley script, which is incredibly important. It's 5,000 years old. Completely undeciphered. Cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa had a very advanced civilization 5,000 years ago, and they had a script that we can't read.
How many different scripts that we can't read exist?
I can't give you a number.
But it's quite a few?
But it's quite a few, yeah. But the most famous is the Indus Valley script.
Isn't it absolutely insane that if it wasn't for the discovery of the Rosetta Stone, how much would still be confusing?
Egypt would be dark to us. It'd all be guesswork.
One stone.
That
Now,
gives us the key.
Imagine having the gall to say you know everything about the history of the earth when literally the discovery of one stone changed everything.
Exactly.
Who knows how many stones out there are not discovered?
Exactly.
And who knows how much is under there?
Yeah, that's right. There's a huge untold story in ancient Egypt.
It's also like the deeper you dig, the more there's different forms of structures. Like they have different construction styles.
Yeah,
that seem to indicate like an older civilization.
They kept on building and rebuilding on older sites.
Yeah.
I mentioned the Edfu building texts. That's a temple from the Ptolemaic period. It contains basically the story of Atlantis, which Egyptologists say had no Egyptian origin, but it contains that story. They call Atlantis the homeland of the primeval ones. That temple was built on the foundations of an earlier temple, which had fallen to pieces. It preserved the archives from that earlier temple. Turns out that earlier temple was itself built on an even earlier temple, going back to pre-dynastic times. So there's a lineage, there's a heritage of stuff being passed down.
And